Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Saturday morning DVC Kawfee Talk, or Kawfee Talk, as my people say. I'm Pete Werner, and joined this week by my good friends from the world of DVC, Mr. Nick Cotton.
Hello. Happy to be back.
And as always, senior editor of DVCFan.com, Mr. Paul Krieger.
Happy Saturday, everybody.
So glad to see so many of you here this morning at this early hour, 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning, East Coast time. Got almost 300 of you now in the room. That's awesome. So thank you for joining us. And I just want to get out in front of this. I'm not going to do these every Saturday because I know that question is going to come up. Just going to be kind of when we think there's something to talk about, some good information out there, or, something's happened. So, I just want to manage expectations, but I do enjoy doing these. It's a great way to start my weekend. I noticed some of you in the chat room are saying that you can't clean your house unless the Diz is broadcasting. So I'm happy to help with your house cleaning. Maybe you can broadcast something to get me to clean my house, which is right now in desperate need of being cleaned. But before we get to folks' questions and all that good stuff, a couple things that I definitely wanted to talk about this week. We mentioned on the last Kawfee Talk that we did that Nick publishes monthly. He'll publish information regarding what they're seeing regarding DVC, like the right of first refusal reports. And we're going to talk about the right of first refusal report that he just published, dealing with December's numbers, but also the blog that he posted about the average sale price of DVC resale contracts at different resorts. Some really, really interesting information. So let's start off, Nick. Let's talk about the right of first refusal reports. I was stunned at the number of buybacks you're seeing at Old Key West. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's great to kind of kick this talk off with a report that finished up kind of a year, talking about the December report. It's nice to kind of be able to just reflect on an entire calendar year of events. And as we talk about Old Key West, it's historically always been one of the most popular resorts for buyback. Percentage-wise, in terms of percentage of the volume that we sell of Old Key West, I would say it's historically number one, where Saratoga Springs is historically number one for just pure volume. Key West finished in 2020 at roughly about a 27% buyback rate, which is high, especially high compared to other DVC resorts. Old Key West, if you're wondering, well, why is Old Key West so popular for buybacks? Why has it historically been popular, and why is it popular now? There's a couple reasons. One is, much like Saratoga Springs, Old Key West is a very popular, if you will, drop product. So what does that mean? So for example, if I'm a sales guy for Disney Vacation Club and I'm selling live inventory, live meaning, let's say Riviera, Aulani, and we're at roughly 200 a point, let's say maybe with some discounts, maybe the net is about in the 180s, maybe 190s, and that's still too much for somebody's budget, but they still want to join. You may have an option like a Saratoga Springs or Old Key West at 165 a point that makes it fit better in somebody's budget. Yes, it may have less years on it, but at the end of the day, it's still a Walt Disney World product, and it has a lot more affordability for me to join. So that's one, kind of big nugget that Old Key West has. The other big nugget that it has is that when Disney Vacation Club buys back an Old Key West contract that has, let's say, an expiration still of 2042, well, when they get to resell it, it's automatically 2057. So that extension of those 15 years, it's automatically added to it. So, they're buying something back with the 2042 value. but automatically it has a 2057 value as soon as they purchase it.
That's I'd never thought about that, but I guess that makes sense. But yeah, what was it, like 27% buyback? Was that the number on Old Key West?
Yeah, yes, yeah, just about 26.9. So yeah, just about right at 27%.
That's crazy. That's crazy. But what are you seeing? Talk about some of the other ones that, which ones are good. I mean, obviously we want people to go read the blog, and we'll make sure we post links to it. But what, like somebody's buying a resale contract, they want to do their best to avoid having it bought back by Disney. What are some of the best resorts right now, in your opinion, that fit into that category?
Well, it's a great question, because one thing I always tell people about right of first refusal when Disney buying back is that it is highly resort dependent. Matter of fact, I would start almost there. When you look at what makes or breaks a decision, it starts there. What resort are we talking about? It's always been very resort dependent. I would say now more so than ever, we see it resort dependent. So when we talk about resorts that they're very unlikely to buy back, certainly, we can certainly put Aulani in that category. I think in 6.5 years, we may have observed one and maybe two Aulani contracts ever purchased back. And they were subsidized dues contracts, and we can have a whole discussion a little bit about what that is and why that is too. But I would say that one's very unlikely to be bought back. Some of the newer resorts tend to be less likely to be bought back. So if we're talking about also a Riviera, a Copper Creek, your chances are also much lower, because Disney has tons of live inventory still on those. Copper Creek just recently sold out. But certainly, Riviera would certainly fit strongly into that category right now too. Is something that they have plenty of inventory of. Aulani also fits in that category, although it's kind of weird thinking of it as a newer resort, given it's been around for 11 years, being sold direct. But in terms of the amount of inventory that Disney still has, it's considered a live product, so they still have plenty of that inventory. So I would say, when you get into some of those, you're very less likely to be bought back. Some other resorts that tend to be on the lower end of the scale, we talk about like a Boulder Ridge, a beach club, a boardwalk. They're a little bit on the lower end of the scale. Those resorts aren't typically going to be sold as a drop product for Disney. They still are going to carry a higher price direct, and they're really more sold direct when somebody is, I have to have beach club. That's the only place I'll ever consider going. And because you're not going to really sell beach club on pure value. It has an expiration date of 2042. It's not the lowest on the scale of annual dues. So that is really for somebody that is targeted for that specific resort, which isn't going to be the majority of the tours that you're going to see, at Disney. But certainly products that are like Saratoga Springs and Old Key West can be more beneficial for direct sales. Animal Kingdom, I would also kind of put in there secondarily as well. And Bay Lake Tower kind of fits then in that second tier, if you will, where, you still got a decent amount of years, you got lower dues. So that one, has a little bit more buyback potential as well. Once we get past the resort criteria, then it's a focus of price is really the next big thing. So when somebody, is looking at, buy and resell, first it just starts with what resort are we talking about? And certainly if we're talking Old Key West, we definitely want to have that right of first refusal conversation. And then I would say then you kind of get to that next tier with Saratoga Springs, and then followed by Animal Kingdom and Bay Lake. And then, like I said, the next criteria is really price. So it comes down then to, you want to look at what's the highest price they're buying back. How does that compare to what I'm getting? And then it's also about the buyer's risk tolerance. Sometimes we talk to buyers who are like, you know what, I'm rolling the dice. Worst case scenario, they buy it back. I lost a few weeks on the market. I just transfer that deposit onto another contract, no big deal. Of course, we have then buyers who are like, you know what, no, this is the perfect contract for us. It's the right use year. I don't want to lose out on this opportunity. Let's price this to where, the odds are significantly in my favor of not having this contract bought back.
Okay. Now, you mentioned something earlier about, wrong one. Hold on. Still getting used to these switching cameras. You mentioned something earlier about Aulani and about subsidized dues and things like that. We haven't talked about this in a long time, and we do get questions on this, and I think it's something that confuses a lot of people. And am I correct in assuming that you were working as a guide, a DVC guide, when all that drama went down?
Yes, matter of fact, I was working on the Disney Dream. I still remember that cruise quite vividly. It's not that often that you're in the middle of a sailing out at sea and you get an email early in the evening that says no more, stop selling.
Oh, looks like we may have lost Nick. Nick, I don't know if you can hear me, but
I can hear you. I think froze for a second.
You're back. So you started out by saying it's not very often that you get an email in the middle of the night saying what?
Yeah, so we got an email in the evening saying no more Aulani sales past midnight tonight. So yeah, you're like, gosh, this is like something out of the Gremlins movie or something, you know, don't feed Gizmo past midnight or something. But like, what is going on? I've never been given these instructions to stop selling. So the thing is, I remember talking to my cruise partner at the time, and we're like, okay, there's obviously something going on here, and probably whatever is going on is going to be, knowing Disney, it's going to be eventually made in the buyer's favor. And so I just remember then we were both calling everybody we talked to so far on that sailing that we knew had any remote interest in Aulani. Sure enough, I had one gentleman that came down and purchased 1,000 Aulani points that very evening before midnight. And I said, look, I don't know exactly. I don't know why the sales are shutting down at midnight, but I'm just going to tell you, I would buy as many points as you think you would ever want there right now, because it's chances are it's going to work out in your favor if I had to bet on the situation. So sure enough, what had happened, some may know, some may not know, but for those that don't, basically there was a snafu in the dues, which made complete sense in a way, because, you know, as guides, when we first saw the dues unveiled for Aulani, and they were cheaper than most of the Walt Disney World locations, we were like, oh my gosh, like, how is this possible? Like, you know, I'm not an expert in Hawaii, but I know that it is an island, and that, you know, a lot of things must get imported over there, and they certainly don't have the economy of scales that, you know, Walt Disney World resorts would have. So that was you know, obviously strange. And in addition to that, it's a coastal property. And, you know, if you're a Hilton Head owner or you're a Vero Beach owner, you certainly know that, you know, dues there typically tend to be higher. Insurance premiums are obviously higher being on the coast versus inland, for obvious reasons. So that was a little surprising. So anyway, it turns out there was a snafu in the dues. They were underestimated. However, this was only discovered until about a month before the resort was about to open. We had been pre-selling Aulani at this point for almost an entire year. So sales were ceased. It was about July 4th, 5th, maybe 5th of July, 2011. Anyway, we had a period up until, gosh, probably, I think it was almost October of that year before we could start reselling Aulani again. In that period, they were just trying to figure out, okay, what are we going to do? What are the dues going to look like? What should they be? And so during that period, it was kind of strange, because they said, well, we can't sell Aulani, but you can get Aulani, almost called them like Aulani promises. It was the weirdest thing. So somebody could put down $500 on a credit card and say, in case I want Aulani, you know, here's a deposit, but then it wasn't really a sale. Anyway, it was like a temporary Band-Aid. And then when they came back live in October, the dues were what they should be to properly maintain the resort. And importantly, for the people that had already purchased, they got an incredible deal. So the people that had already purchased and their contract had closed, they basically got subsidized dues in effect. So basically Disney agreed to subsidize the cost of their dues for the life of their membership, and that subsidy was transferable, very important too. So if you see subsidized dues contracts for Aulani on the resale market, just know that is something that is transferable, and it will save you a considerable amount of money each year. In fact, with the dues subsidy, Aulani is the lowest dues in the market. So it's quite substantial. And then also for the people that were kind of in a pending status, meaning they had signed a contract on or before that July 5th date, but they had not closed, not only were they going to get subsidized dues for whatever they had already purchased, Disney offered them the opportunity to say, hey, if you do want to get more points right now, then you can do that. And those would also be subsidized as well. And that was kind of a one-time opportunity for those folks. Really, it's a unique thing for Aulani. Actually, I should say Vero Beach has a similar thing, but for a much, much smaller amount of contracts for a different situation that happened back in the 90s. But anyway, for Aulani, it does represent a tremendous deal. And even though we've had a couple of those bought back in 6.5 years, the percentage of buybacks on those subsidized dues is also incredibly low.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I wasn't really paying attention to DVC when this all went down, but some heads rolled because of this, as you put it, snafu. Am I correct?
Yes. There was a change at the top. Jim Lewis was the current president at the time, and then Claire Bilby became president post the snafu. So I don't know how much publicly obviously Disney wanted to make any of this stuff. Obviously not something that they wanted to proudly talk about, but basically that was the end result. Is there was a change at the top, and then there was also some finance positions that got changed as well.
Yeah, because like I said, I've heard subsequently that there was a lot of drama around that, but I'll often see questions about subsidized Aulani contracts and what exactly that means. And I knew that it had something to do with dues, but I didn't know the whole story. But here we're getting it from a guy who lived through it while he was on a cruise, well, working on a cruise. All right, so let's talk about your average price blog as well. What are some of the takeaways from that?
Well, I would say right now to folks, we're definitely noticing a trend. And that trend being that demand is really skyrocketing right now. That big upswing in demand. I mean, we've done ever since really, I would say, I don't know, how do you even describe this stuff now, 2020, but phase one of the pandemic, if you will, the shock and awe of March and April, where we really we started to see the market get depressed very temporarily. I would say by May, we started to see an upswing, and really that just continued by late summer. Prices had only dipped maybe 5% at the height of that the first COVID scare, March, April timeframe. The month of May may have represented the lowest point. By the end of the summer, we're back to the prices that were pre-pandemic, amazingly enough. We finished the year at roughly being about 5% over prior year, same time of year. So astonishing. The demand is really starting to surge, especially now that we're getting into what is traditionally peak season for buyers. This is the Disney travel planning season, if you will, right when you get a couple days after Christmas, all the way through March. That's when you certainly see your biggest demand. And I'll say this too. I mean, even if my time at the Disney Reservation Center, my time at Cruise Line, my time at DVC with telesales, all start having really high demand periods this time of year. Same thing in the secondary market with resale. And we're getting, right now, high demand. You also couple that with just, I think, a macro picture that is getting more and more optimistic as vaccines get more distributed. People may not think, sometimes people aren't like, well, I'm going to travel next month, but they're thinking, okay, things should be good, certainly late summer, fall, next winter, those kind of things. So we're hearing a lot of that feedback, a lot of optimism for traveling later in this year. And that really is perfect when you're thinking about a resale contract anyway. Certainly if you're thinking about vacation next month or the next 2 or 3 months, resale is not for you. It does take 60 to 90 days generally to close on a resale contract. And then you have to plan after that and make sure that you have availability. So you've got demand going up. And on the same time, supply may not be what it traditionally has been. This time of year, we typically see the highest rate of supplies, and that's highly correlated with the dues bill going out. Well, this year's a little different because there's a 2021 credit applied to a lot of folks' dues bill for the closures for last year. So you've got dues being a little bit more affordable this year than they typically would have been. You've also got some stimulus money perhaps coming out too, which will kind of work in a negative way for supply, because so maybe some folks that we're going to need to sell, maybe they don't because they have the stimulus check, but then at the same time you're going to even add more buyers to the market because they've got some extra money in their pocket for something like this. So you've really you do have certainly a dynamic right now of increasing inventory, increasing demand. We saw inventory go from well over 400 contracts to just in the upper 200s within a matter of 5 weeks. And I think right now we just got a bunch of new listings in yesterday to put us a little over 300 listings.
Wow. Just let me cut in real quick here. Noticing some folks on Facebook are saying the audio is cutting in and out. That's not something I have any control over. The audio on my end, I'm listening to Nick and everything sounds good. People are saying that the quality of the feed is better on our YouTube channel because right now we are broadcasting on both. So if you're having trouble with the feed on Facebook, head over to youtube.com/DVC fan, and we are live there as well. And you might get a better feed there. So I apologize for that, but not something I can control from here. Okay, so one of the questions that just came in that I think is a good one for Nick and Paul is regarding the tower at Disneyland. Do you think they're going to move forward with that? Do you think we're going to ultimately see that tower? Nick's nodding his head.
I think so. I think Reflections is a much bigger question mark. And I don't even know if they know the answer to that one right now, but I think the tower, I would be shocked, honestly, if they don't move forward with that at Disneyland. If you follow the history of them trying to get another resort there, especially for DVC, there's a lot of politics involved, and I don't think they're going to want to let that opportunity go. You also just look at, what has happened to Grand California. Look how challenging it can be to get in there if you don't own there. Look at the resale price of it. I think they know that there will also be some strong demand there to purchase it. And there's no better evidence than what the Grand California is now. So I would be surprised if they don't move forward with that tower.
And let's get your take on this. I know I've opined about what I think the opening sale price for the tower is going to be. What do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, I would think, with Grand Cal being rumored now to go close to 300 a point direct, and then you look that we're in resale we're in the 220s. I would think you'd have to start in the upper 200s. It may be your first resort that you launch at 300 a point.
Wow.
If I'm them and I'm looking that, and they still sell, by the way, when they buy back Grand Cal, they still are able to sell it, at the prices they are in the upper 200s. So keep in mind, that has an expiration date of 2060. So you're going to add now you're going to have a 50-year likely, assuming that they do that as well. You'll have a resort that would end in the 2070s. And so why would you not, price it obviously, even higher? So I wouldn't be surprised, to see that at all.
Now, I cut to Paul's shot when you said might be the first resort to go at 300, and I cut to Paul's shot because I wanted people to see his face.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I know Nick just alluded to this, and it was confirmed earlier this week on January 14th, I believe it was. The new pricing for Grand Californian launched at I think it's $295 a point direct now. So they're really hugging that 300 point threshold, and I think that's on purpose. We saw the slowdown in construction at Reflections happen a month or so, or a couple months after everything started, and we saw them continuing to move forward with that Disneyland Tower permitting process. So I definitely think that we're moving forward with the Disneyland DVC Tower. I think that is locked in, and they're going to plan to move forward with that. It may be a little bit slower than they originally predicted in terms of a time frame, but I think that is the next property that they really have their eyes on after Riviera. In terms of pricing, I think what we're seeing in direct pricing increase for Grand Californian is a reflection of where they want pricing to go for the Disneyland DVC Tower. Since it's at $295 now, I would expect probably before the Disneyland Tower opens that we see Grand Californian direct be over 300 a point, and I think we see maybe an opening of the Disneyland Tower somewhere around 250 is what they're gaming for right now. I mean, if you look at where we're at right now, direct with Riviera and Aulani, that's bold of them if they want to make an $100 per point jump there to sort of creep up near 300 a point for those. But it's Disney and they love money, so I wouldn't be surprised either.
And their decision making is not always what we call sane. A question that we just had come in, I'll put it up on the screen here. There it is. Oh, and it went away. There it is. From David Raguso. To sell points, in other words, to sell his contract, do you have to have no points used? Do you have to have 100% of points available? Example, if all 2020 October use year points are used, when can I sell? Nicholas?
Great question, David. And here's the great news. You can sell that contract if you've got all your points on it. You can sell that contract if you've got none of your points available on it. And, does it make a pricing difference? It does. But I would say it could make potentially two things swing it in your value. One is just the overall price tag. So it might adjust at about $6 a point for 1 year's of points not being there. And then also, no new buyer is going to reimburse you on 2021 dues, for example, if you didn't have your 2021 points. But if you had your 2021 points right now, that's something that certainly we could work to get a reimbursement for you from the new buyer. So there's kind of two ways, that can swing for you. In terms of 2020 points, you wouldn't get a dues reimbursement on that anyway at this point now that we're in 2021. But value-wise, it does help to have those extra points there, but certainly doesn't mean that it can't be sold. In fact, with some buyers, it makes it a much easier sell sometimes to not even have those points on there. So it really depends on the buyer. I love it when we have just a great mix of contracts that we kind of refer to as loaded, if you will, meaning there's tons of points on it. Then we also have contracts that are a bit more stripped out, meaning that they don't have the points for last year or this year. And I tell you why I love having the mix, because obviously if there's tons of points on there, you know what that means. Lots of great vacations, bigger rooms, go more often, at least in the short run, because of all these extra points on it. But there also is an advantage of not having the points on there too for some buyers, because you could have some buyers who say, you know what, I wasn't planning on going this year anyway, so I wouldn't know even what to do with those points. Now, granted, we can say, hey, we got DVC rental store over here. There is a nice little financial opportunity to rent those points out. But without those points being there, it can also help people. The affordability goes up considerably to get started with Disney Vacation Club. And just for an example's sake, like right now, if you were to look at DVC resale market contracts and you were to pick a contract, let's say, it's a 160 point Animal Kingdom, for example, that didn't have any 2021 points on it. If it's priced to market value, very likely if we put that in the Monera financial model, you're actually going to see the down payment, the out of pocket, if you will. They label it difference on our website, but it's about $1,000. So add on to that $1,000, perhaps you've got an origination fee of $199, you've got a mortgage recording fee. Let's just call all that kind of stuff about $400 to $500. So you're talking about $1,400 to $1,500 total out of pocket when I consider down payment and then closing costs associated with getting a loan. Well, the only other thing you got out there is your closing costs for the contract. Well, if that's all you negotiate and you just say, hey, I'll pay these folks the price they're asking, but if they will cover the closing costs, then I will get this contract. You could literally be getting a contract that has a healthy number of points. I mean, we're talking about 150 contracts, 200-point contracts for less than $1,500 out of pocket. So that is also very advantageous. So I always encourage people who think, oh gosh, I can't sell my contract because I've already used last year's points and this year's points. I don't think it'll be able to sell. That's definitely not true. There's certainly a market out there as the affordability to purchase that contract via financing can be very advantageous.
All right. Another question, and it's a good question because we hear this a lot on both rentals and purchases, from Pablo Gonzalez. Do you rent points from a DVC international account? I am a Mexican DVC member since 2012 and have Animal Kingdom and Aulani.
Absolutely. You can still rent points being an international member. If you go to dvcrentalstore.com and you go to that member section, there's actually a whole page dedicated to international members, and it kind of just walks you through step by step of what that means. One of the most important things, and I'm not going to go into all the steps on the air, but certainly we have it laid out. But one of the biggest things is you will need an I-10 number. So just keep that in mind. If you already have that, quickly the process is going to go much quicker. If you don't have that I-10, that's something that you will need to get. For those that aren't aware, the I-10 is kind of like it's kind of like a social security number for folks that aren't United States citizens. So we just that unique identifier does have to be created. Same thing when you're selling a contract as well.
And is that difficult? Is that a difficult thing to get, the I-10?
No, it's not difficult, but it's just an extra step that you do need to take care of.
All right. Another question I want to address. Again, we still have this Facebook problem where we don't see the Facebook username. So I don't know your name. I apologize. If APs don't return to Walt Disney World, do you foresee any sort of continued ticket deal, maybe along the lines of the military deal for DVC members? Those who take multiple trips per year may be forced to rent out their points in lieu of buying multiple multi-day tickets for multiple trips. That would be direct competition for Disney in filling their resort rooms. I want to just talk about this. I know there's a lot of speculation about Walt Disney World's annual pass program. Obviously, right now, annual pass sales have been suspended. The fact that they are allowing annual pass holders to renew is all the proof I need right now that there is no intention of getting rid of the annual pass program at Walt Disney World. Now, of course, like 11 million tons of gasoline were poured on that fire last week when Disneyland announced that they were sunsetting their annual pass program. The language in that announcement makes it almost clear, as clear as Disney will ever be with something like that, that another annual pass program is going to take its place, one that is far more advantageous to Disney, I'm sure. But I don't think we're looking at a scenario where there will be no more annual passes. Right now, because of capacity, because of you have to make reservations to get into parks and all that stuff, they've just pulled back on it. They've just pulled back on selling any new annual passes, and it makes sense. that they've done that, because, you can't use it as readily as you're used to. Like normally when you have an annual pass, you go whenever you feel like it, and you go to this park or that park. And the only time you're ever worried about capacity is on like New Year's Eve or Christmas. But outside of that, you can go to whatever park you want whenever you want. The fact that that is not currently available is one of the reasons they have pulled back on annual passes. So I just want to kind of temper everybody's frenzy. I can't imagine a scenario where Disney no longer sells annual passes. It would be it would be among the stupidest things they've ever done. Then again, with Dr. Evil in charge, who knows? But Nick, what do you think? Paul, you want to jump in?
Well, I was talking to Derek over at DVC about this a little bit when the price increases occurred for some of those sold out direct resorts earlier this week. And one of the things you can't get past as a DVC member right now is the fact that one of the big pushes to buy direct are these direct member benefits, one of which, or the largest of which, being discounted annual passes that you can purchase. And I think that by getting rid of those, on top of everything else that they've gotten rid of as member incentives in this current environment, it would just be incredibly hard to continue. And I would throw this to Nick a little bit. Like, Nick, could you imagine trying to sell direct Disney Vacation Club right now without all of those benefits, without really having any of those things to really talk about in that sales pitch, so to say? Because I think that would be a big struggle. I agree with you, Pete. I think Disneyland has been looking for a reason to reinvent their AP system for a long time, and I think that they sort of looked at this as the opportunity to do so. So that's what they're doing, and we have seen them continuing to sell renewals of APs over at Walt Disney World. So again, wouldn't put it past Chapek, but I can't see it happening.
Yeah, I was just going to throw it over to you, Nick, because I want you to talk to that what Paul just mentioned about how are direct guides selling this right now with all of these perks not present.
Yeah, I will tell you, one of the first perks that people even ask about, if you haven't already proactively mentioned it, was, hey, do I get discounts on tickets when I become a DVC member? So certainly an AP discount is a significant thing, even if it's not really financially that significant. It's more of a mental thing, like, why am I coming to Disney? And it's generally to go to the theme park. So it just obviously ties together. It's a nice thing to say, certainly when you're on tour, as an added bonus. But I agree with everything you guys have said. I think more than anything, from what I have heard, is that this is a time, not just with annual passes, but with a lot of things, to do things, to try things that are different, that are outside the box. I do think, my gut tells me, they will bring the annual pass back. What it will look like may be different, but you have to think, I'm just thinking a little bit in the DVC bubble, but there's been ideas that, they may have had for the last decade, but we're afraid to ever try, because every year you've got certain goals, and every year it's a stretch goal. And gosh, what happens if your idea results in them not making their budgeted plan, and then eggs on your face. And so you think about it, what's the ramification of that? I might lose my job. What if it works out great? Oh, good. Maybe you'll get a promotion in 3 years. So the downside certainly outweighed any positive side of trying to, do something different or outside the box. So now, the goals are much lower. It's much more of a time to say, hey, we're in a new world. How do we think about this new world going forward? Oh, that idea that you ran by me 3 years ago, why don't we throw that out there right now and try it out? So I think there's a lot of that going on across Disney right now. So I think it's more probably a time to hit the reset button. How do we really want to do this going forward? Where sometimes you're so afraid to pull triggers that you think makes sense, but people get so used to things, you're afraid to upset the base. And you know, I mean, I even, you know, even going to the parks, I mean, one thing I've really enjoyed personally is just the cavalcades. I mean, I like them better than the parades. I don't mind certainly having, you know, maybe one parade a day, but I think it almost got to the point where the Disney World, and this is my opinion, and I know people could share very different opinions on this, but it almost got to the point where it's almost a little too structured. Like I have to, all right, here's the 3 o'clock parade, make sure we're here at that time and everything like that, where I kind of like the idea of a little more spontaneity to it. You know, it to me, it's a little more magical when I'm just, you know, I'm walking through the park and then all of a sudden I see I see the stepsisters at the back of the castle and they're talking to us, you know, in character versus, you know, you just see them signing autographs for 30 minutes and, you know, and that's not really how you see the characters in the movie Cinderella. So I think there's a little bit of authenticity with that, a little spontaneity, and, you know, things like that would have probably never been tried, you know, a year ago, just, you know, just for an example. But I think even from a business standpoint, there's a lot of thinking of, okay, you know, what can we do better that we would have never tried before?
Well, I just want to point out to you, Nick, that you're talking about spontaneity to an audience of people who plan their vacations to Disney World on an Excel spreadsheet. Okay. You know, I don't know that this is the audience that you want to embrace spontaneity. We like to plan everything we do at Disney to within an inch of its life. One question that's coming up that I'll throw to you, Nick. This is from someone on Facebook. Again, I apologize, I don't have your name. Why are right of first refusals going through so quickly? Ours went through in 10 days. Are you seeing that right of first refusals going through quicker than usual?
Yeah, it's the result of me buying them fruit baskets on a daily basis. No, there's no bribery going on. We're just very happy that it is getting to be a bit faster. I mean, one thing historically Disney's always done with waivers is it's very much in a batch process. Sometimes, you know, it gets to the point where it takes 30 days and then sometimes it takes 10 days because they have to reallocate the sources from one spot to another. But, you know, during the pandemic, we were having some really long periods to wait. So I am just happy, very happy right now that we are seeing some batches go through that quickly. Knock on wood that continues, because that's awesome. We love it, obviously, for our clients, you know, just to get that answer much faster, to get the closing done for our buyers much faster.
Seeing some questions about Magical Express, asking me my opinion on Magical Express. You want to hear what I thought about that? Diz Unplugged, youtube.com/Diz Unplugged. Head over there, watch the show, the live show we did Tuesday. I more than made myself clear on that. Let's see what else we have here.
While you're looking for another one, something I wanted to ask Nick, going back to sort of the pricing discussion, and I've absolutely completely lost the numbers I wanted to look at. So we did see over on the Disney Vacation Club website the pricing increase on some sold out resorts this week, but it was very weird to see what resorts they chose to do that with. Bay Lake Tower, Beach Club, Boardwalk, Grand Californian, and Polynesian. And when you compare that to sort of the right of first refusal reports that you've written, those aren't necessarily resorts that they buy back a ton of. I personally would expect maybe a price increase from business mindset of Old Key West and Saratoga a little bit to increase the margin that they're making on those buybacks, since they're doing so quickly. Were you surprised that we didn't see an increase on those two resorts as well?
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul. You know, I tell you, so part of it is in you know, the reason that they're not buying some of those back. Obviously, we talked about the drop product phenomenon, but also it's what is your margin opportunity, right? And so when you think about it, if we're selling Grand Californian in the 220s a point, and they're around 270 a point for it, that's a pretty tight margin on that in terms of percentage wise. So it, you can, then you can start to understand why they probably want to elevate that price, and some of those in particular that have gone up quite a bit in the world of resale, because if they are going to buy them back, which let's say they don't, even though they don't have a plan to necessarily aggressively buy them back, if they are to fulfill a wait list, certainly they want to be able to increase those margins that they're seeing. So, they're certainly not in the business of trying to sell sold out inventory, but certainly if they are going to do it on those one-off occasions, certainly for somebody that really needs Grand California, somebody that really demands Beach Club, certainly they want to try to increase their margin as much as possible. And, getting back to even the discussion about the tower out there, you mentioned, Paul, that they would have Grand California probably priced higher than the tower. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. From a sales strategy, I mean, even if they, let's just say the new tower is going to be for sale at, let's say, in the 290s a point, maybe 300, as high as that, I would say by that time Grand California would likely be 320, 330 a point, because you certainly want to put your live inventory in a very advantageous spot, because you want to, you don't want to, you sell what you see, don't see what you can sell, old sales philosophy. So you've got tons of this live inventory. That's what you want to make attractive. And then the best way to do that is in comparison to an older product, and make it, this has more years, it's a lower price, makes total sense, similar location. And just, it also talking about Grand California kind of even triggered, I remember, talk about, just triggered some memories. You talk about sales strategy and what you'd price it at. I remember we struggled to sell Grand Californian so much that at Disney World, they started offering the sales guides, myself included, special promotions when you sold so much you got an iPad, because they were struggling so much to sell it, which is just completely crazy to think about right now. Matter of fact, I remember selling Grand Californian on the cruise ship, coupled with cruise promotions with cast discount in the 70s per point.
Oh my God.
Actually, yes, one of the gentlemen that worked at the port was on my repositioning cruise that I had going from London down to Barcelona. He bought 300 points at Grand Californian at about net of about 71 a point. Resold them with us about a year and a half ago for north of 200 a point. So, I mean, those stories you don't hear about those every day. That
Right.
But that did happen. And I think the thing that was a lesson for a lot of the West Coast audience that was not, and I put the blame on Disney more than the audience. It's our job, or especially when I was directed, it was the job of Disney to communicate to the guests how important it is to own at this specific resort. You're only going to have 50 units there, and it's for the foreseeable future the only one that's going to be there. And once you get inside that 7-month window, you have got a lot of members in the system who can now book it. And so I don't think the understanding of how important home resort priority would be was thoroughly communicated. Obviously not communicated enough, because the sales were sluggish. And now you see it in resale years later, where the understanding is much clearer that I need to have priority there. And you can see with the resale price what it is. I don't think they're going to have as much of that problem when they release the tower, needless to say.
These are those moments where I wish I had a time machine.
Yeah, well, you hear stories like that, about Grand California, somebody buying Grand Californian at about $70 some odd a point. And you're like, oh my God. One question, I don't have it up here now, but I thought it was a really good question, Nick. With these resorts that expire in 2042, at what point do you think we're going to see those resorts, the price per point on those resorts, decline precipitously as it gets closer to that date?
No, another really good question that does come up occasionally. I would say, in the phenomenon we also experience is that the prices of the beach club boardwalk, some of these 2042 places, have continued to go up despite their years obviously going down. And obviously, one of the things that strongly contributes to that is certainly inflation of the resort rooms. When you do the math on the historical inflation of Walt Disney World rooms going back to 1971 when the resort first opened, Polynesian opened at $29, and the Contemporary opened at $29 a night. And so when you do that math to what it is today, you're going to be looking at about a 6% inflation on those rooms. So maybe 7% even. So what happens is, if I look at, okay, well, the beach club, I've only got 21 years left on it. But if I want to go book a week there now, it may cost me, $6,000 or $7,000 based on, what room I'm getting and things like that. But then you say, okay, I take the dues out of that. Well, I still break even on this, purchase in maybe 4 years, and I still have then another, 15, years left roughly to use it. So I still have the value. So it still holds the value. Now, getting to the question of what point does that math not hold anymore, I think, it'll probably be, if I had to, and I have no crystal ball on this, but if I had to play the scenario out in my head, I would think that we're probably going to start seeing prices start to stall out and then maybe start declining. Probably once we get within about 10 years is probably, I think, where it'll become much more apparent on people's minds that, okay, hey, here's the end. But I think at the end, you might not see such a decline. It just depends on also the inflation of the rooms, because even if I'm buying Beach Club from somebody in the year 2040 and the room for that week is going to be, who knows? I know it may sound crazy right now, but it could be $20,000, and somebody wants me to pay $25,000. Well, I probably will do it for that contract because I'm getting 2 vacations, for the price of just a little bit more than one. So I think there will probably always be a value into the end. It just, I think, becomes a question of, do you stop seeing a price escalation, and when does that happen? And then does it just kind of flatten out? Does it slightly decline? But I think there'll be a value all the way up until you have that last vacation there, and it's really driven heavily, by inflation at Disney. And it's one of these phenomena too. Of I remember getting interviewed by the Orlando Sentinel a couple years back, and they were asking me, well, why does resale in Disney hold so much value compared to other timeshares? And it really comes down to your opportunity cost. With some of these timeshares, especially the ones that are off the beaten path, but even some brand names, if they have to discount the room so much to fill up the resort that it gets to the price of where the dues are at or under it, essentially the timeshare is not worth anything. But Disney is certainly not that case. The room values, continue. They rent extremely well above the dues, and so as long as that continues, I think you'll continue to see very strong value. Even with these 2042 resorts, even until we get to some of those last couple of vacations, as long as that week cost continues to go up, we'll still see some value.
Last question coming in from Facebook. I was going to ask it anyway, because we hear this all the time, and I've never asked you because this is kind of new, you and I. Do you think Disney is going to offer extensions on the resort contracts that expire in 2042?
Yeah, I love this one. I've been asked this one a few times over the years for sure. This one comes up pretty frequently, and it's a very reasonable and good question. I think so. I think there was a lesson learned with the Old Key West extension. Keep in mind, too, there is a little bit of a misconception about the Old Key West extension. People think that people opted into the Old Key West extension. It was actually the opposite. What Disney did is they extended the entire resort till 2057, and then you had to opt out of the extension. And that created a logistical nightmare, because we had to hound all of the members. So everybody's on the phone with everybody that ever owned Key West saying, hey, even if you're not going to do the extension, you still have to get these documents notarized and signed and returned to us. And there was a mass amount of confusion on that, because people are like, well, I don't want it. Well, I know you don't want it. You just have to sign and notarize that you don't want it. And so the other part about the Old Key West extension was that, think about it. It sounds like an amazing deal, right? It started off at $15 a point. You're going to extend for 15 years. Biggest problem is you're trying to sell something to somebody in the year 2007 that they can't start enjoying until 2042. So, I mean, how often do you buy something that you don't get the benefit of for another 35 years? And so that in itself is obviously a major dilemma. And the take rate on the extension was extremely low, as you would imagine. But a lot of the guys didn't necessarily mind calling a lot of the members about it, because inevitably in a lot of those conversations, what came up was like, you know what, I don't really know what I want to do 35 years from now, but you know what, we were actually thinking about getting more points for next year's vacation. Can we just talk about doing an add-on? And so, it did lend itself to some of those conversations. But will they do it again? I do think it's very possible. I just think from a business standpoint, it makes a lot more sense to approach members about that within like maybe a 5-year scope of expiration, because now it's a very tangible thing. It's very close in. It's on my mind likely as a member that this is going to end. And I think that's probably going to be, more of the approach. Certainly, as long as Disney is still proven a very sustainable and profitable model with Disney Vacation Club, it only makes sense to continue to extend those. But I just think it's going to be a lot more closer to those expiration dates when we'll see them.
Yeah, we hear this all the time, and I think they're going to. Somebody just commented on Facebook, I disagree. DVC will take it all back, refurbish, and sell for direct prices, especially Beach Club and Boardwalk. I don't know how feasible that is, but we're not going to know. We're not going to know for another 20, 21 years.
And I would add to this. Now, when I say I think they're going to offer extensions, I don't think it's going to be at a very cheap price. It's not going to be a giveaway price. It's going to be, maybe they're going to come to folks that are members and say, hey, this is going to be maybe a 10% savings of what we're going to offer it to the general public, perhaps, or something like that, if you want to get in, kind of providing that urgency tool to members. But I don't think you certainly that close in are not going to see anything like a $15 extension, which eventually became a $25 extension. Nothing like that. It'll certainly be at a considerable price, but I think from a sales perspective, it just makes all the sense in the world when you to offer it to the existing members at perhaps at least a little bit of a discount, get that urgency with members. Also, you think about, what's my marketing cost that goes into trying to get new people in the club when I've already got somebody that's in the club, and simply to offer this opportunity for them with a little bit of an urgency and a little bit of a discount, but certainly no giveaway price.
Yep, I'm inclined to agree. All right, folks, that is going to do it for our little Saturday morning coffee talk. Nick, always great having you. You're just a fountain of information. I learned so much listening to you. I'm sure the audience does as well. And of course, Paul, thank you for everything you do. Thank you to your wife, Amy, for putting up with you.
Paul, I'll do that one with you. I get you, bro. I get you. We got to. No. I think Toy, and you think Amy. I get you.
So, thank you, folks. That'll do it. We'll see you again whenever we do.